So for 8 years in a row, the number of homeless students enrolled in New York City schools has topped 100,000. As it stands, there are a little over 119,000 students without a permanent place to call home. That breaks down to 1 in 9 students.
So the numbers are higher in the Bronx, where 22% of students were homeless. That breaks down to 1 in 6 students. Now, the study was conducted by the Advocates for Children of New York. This morning, we're joined by the woman overseeing the project, Jennifer Pringle. So, Jennifer, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, your agency's been tracking the numbers for years. Were you expecting numbers, I guess, to be this high, especially considering the surge in migrant children into the system as well?
I mean, the numbers are very disturbing, and we were certainly expecting to see somewhat of an increase given what we had been hearing about the number of kids in shelter. But a 14% increase is a large one and not the direction.
Yeah, so did the migrant influx have an effect on this number, or was this prior to the migrant?
Well, you know, as you pointed out in the intro, this is the 8th year that the number of students identified as homeless has been over 100,000. So this is not a new issue here in New York City. This is a long-standing, stubborn, pernicious issue. And, you know, certainly there's been an increase that, you know, common sense would indicate is related to the increase in the number of shelters for a newcomer families.
So when you zero in, I guess, on the boroughs, right, and specifically the Bronx, that was 1 in 6. What makes the Bronx so different than the other boroughs?
Yeah, so the Bronx is the 3rd in terms of enrollment out of the boroughs, but number 1 in terms of the number of students in temporary housing, and it's been that way for many years. You know, the data doesn't tell us why, you know, but it's correlated with poverty, with a number of evictions that have gone up since the pandemic. Again, the Bronx has remained at the top of the list for many years in a row.
Yeah, there are so many areas all across the city, though. I mean, in Brownsville, Bushwick, East New York, and Brooklyn, they also have more than 20% of students without permanent housing. A spokesperson, though, from the city's Department of Education said this to us, quote, "We will continue to work with our partners at the city and state levels to identify and establish supports for our students in temporary housing while contending with the city's financial stability." Did the project, though, find that the schools in these areas have enough services to address the problem?
I mean, I think the schools would say there are never enough services. That said, I think schools are doing an amazing job trying to stand up supports for families, welcome them, connect them with needed supports both in and outside of school. The Department of Education also hired 100 shelter-based community coordinators to help with enrollment, to help with transportation. Many families in shelter are placed in a different borough from where their kids go to school, so accessing transportation is a huge issue for those families. You know, no child wants to have to transfer schools in the middle of the school year, and no school wants to see a constant revolving door of students in their classrooms. So that school continuity is so important, and those coordinators play a big role in making sure that that happens.
Right, the Bronx was one thing, right? And so when you look at the factors, though, and you go to the other boroughs, like in Queens, there was a 30% increase. So are the factors the same as what you saw in the Bronx, or what is making the Queens suddenly have a 30% increase?
Yeah, so, you know, the Queens is top of the list in terms of enrollment, but has the percentage of students experiencing homelessness has been lower than other boroughs. As you said, there was a 30% increase. You know, we also saw an increase after the pandemic. We know that Queens was hard hit economically because of the pandemic. There's a rise in student homelessness in the borough as well. We also know that many shelters have opened up in Queens recently as well. Again, Bronx still remains at the top of the list. And Queens, again, has seen that increase.
Why do you think it's so important that you gather this information? What's your end goal and what to accomplish with it?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. You know, obviously, we don't want any child to experience homelessness, but what we do know is that the way to end family homelessness is to make sure that the young people right now in shelter, in temporary housing arrangements, have access to school. Because if you don't get a high school diploma, you're 4.5 times more likely to experience homelessness as an adult. So if we want to break this cycle, we have to make sure that our kiddos right now experiencing homelessness have access to school. And so things like these coordinators and shelters to help connect them to school, connect them with transportation are so vitally important.
Important work you are doing. Thank you for breaking it all down for us by the numbers. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jennifer Pringle.